My question is, I want to go back to, I think it's Ibrahim, your original quotes. Thank you for these quotes, because I like to get to the bottom of things. And I wanted to ask about, to all of you, in reference to the Quran and the specific quotes with respect to how women are treated. There are, or at least what has been suggested, if I understand correctly, amongst some of the speakers today, that this may be a cultural interpretation rather than the original intent of the Quran. So is this a issue of translation, or how else? Because I don't know how else I'm seeing this other than what I'm seeing and what I'm reading. So help me understand how I'm not to interpret that the Quran is promoting subjugation and objectification and misogyny, not unlike other religions, because I find the quotes in other books as well. But help me try to understand if this is not correct, if this is a cultural thing, then I'd like some clarification.
Blue? Okay, so I'm going to start. So I don't think it's a cultural thing because there's only one Quran. It's not even supposed to be translated. Like when you read a translation for the Quran, there's a disclaimer that says, well, this is not really the Quran, this is a translation of the Quran. Because the Quran itself is so amazing. It's the word of the creator of the universe, but you can't even translate it. Your translation takes away from the meaning. It's amazing. It's an amazing meaning. But what I'm doing is, what I was trying to do is like, I'm showing you what it says. This is actually what it says in Arabic. I'm not translating it, I'm telling you the translation that I think. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. You tell me what your translation is. Some people have different interpretations of translations. Some people, and I didn't show this ayah, but it's the most controversial one, is that, a husband is allowed to beat his wife. وَضْرَبُوهُنَّ. And some people, the word وَضْرَبُوهُنَّ means to beat, to strike. But a lot of people say, well, no, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean to beat or strike. It means to walk away. Like hit the road, like instead of hit, like hit the road. It's like, oh, it means that. And you know what? I don't know how to feel about that. I mean, in a way, they are trying. What they're trying to do is, they're trying to make it work for themselves. They're trying to oh no, it really doesn't say that. It says something better. But, I mean, for a lot of people, especially in a country like my own country of Egypt, where I grew up, people can read Arabic. They actually speak the language and they can read this and they understand what the word means. And, it causes a lot of problems. Matter of fact is, it causes problems in the real world because of what it says and because anybody can read it. This is a book that's in every house. People have to read from it. If you're a practicing Muslim, 5 times a day. 5 times a day. So if you read this, what do you understand? I understand it to be exactly what it says. Some other people might not choose to, some other people might choose to see it differently to make it better. But why am I gonna try to make it look better when it actually says something else? I don't do that. Some other people might want to do that. I don't do that. Anybody want to speak?
I'd like to answer to that. I think I really liked the speech that you made, and I think with the Arab Spring there was the hope that there would be political activism by groups of people who were trying to find a third way and an alternative. And I think the way that we deal with these issues is to demand that people of all religions, in Egypt for example, Copts, Baha'is, Shias, and Sunnis, are recognized as citizens of the countries in which they live. And that if people choose to practice their religions, that we try to marginalize and privatize it to the extent possible. At the same time, if you encourage and cultivate civil society, you then need to work not just at the level of laws, because we know in this country we have laws, for example, against sexual harassment. And in spite of that, we have entire cultures of silence where men of power are allowed to act with impunity, and lawyers who draw up agreements where victims who have been given compensation are not even allowed to challenge these laws. So I think what you have now going on, for example, in the Arab world, are young people launching these incredible campaigns for equality against sexual harassment, and the idea is to simultaneously change attitudes. I think that the psychic structures and attitudes and changing the culture is as important a piece of that as reinterpreting scripture. But the important thing is to fight for separation of state and mosque.
I'm just completing on Tuesday my semester, and I'm teaching a course on religion and politics. And I tell my students, God is a male. All religions are patriarchal, and we know God is a male. Now, you'll say, no, in my religion, God doesn't have a gender. Okay, come on, spare me. Here's how you know that God is a male. Who has the authority to speak on behalf of God? That's called a nimistic power. Do you have the authority to speak on behalf of God? Ask yourself, who stands in front of your congregation and tells you God's opinion on these subjects? It's always a male, except in my church. My God is a female because my pastor is a woman. So I guess I have a female God, and she keeps reminding us that he is not a male. But I think what we need to do is recognize that there is the power of interpretation. And this I know in my own Protestant tradition has been very powerful. People have gone to the texts and they have created a hermeneutic, which is a female empowerment. Hermeneutic means a way of interpretation. They have created a female empowerment hermeneutic. And so at this particular point, in Protestant seminaries, half of all the people studying for the ministry are females. It's a historic transformation that's occurring. It is not occurring in the Catholic Church. I don't think it's occurring in Islam very much. It's occurring a little bit. It's occurring in Judaism because now there are female rabbis, and there used to be one here, but I guess she's gone on. But I think it's very complex. But I think if you perceive that religion is patriarchal, you're about 90% correct.
So I think first of all, write down these. What's your name? Anne. Okay, so write down these names, or if you can write down, or put them in your phone or whatever. Fatima Ahmed. Fatima Mernisi, and Layla Ahmed. Fatima, Fatima, Mernisi, Mernissi, and Layla Ahmed, Leila Ahmed. They have written pretty powerful books on using the Quran and the first days of Islamic history as feminist tools, okay? Tools to advance feminist thought in the Arab world. I think Quranic interpretation is, and I have a master's degree in Middle East Studies where we studied the Quran for a long time, and I think it is, it's ultimately a political exercise, no matter how hard you try. So you are going to usually, no matter how hard you try, come to whatever conclusion you want to come to based on your politics or your worldview. So also, unfortunately, Quranic interpretation seems to, no one seems to have any expectation that the person engaging in it has any pedigree at all. So like Bill Maher does it all the time. Okay, where he gets on the news and he talks about it, and from a progressive liberal point of view, right? And to me, the ultimate question is this: if I think that, for instance, I'll use Bill Maher as an example. I can agree with Bill Maher on what the problems are in the Arab world, like what they are. Okay, I can agree with him on what they are. But he believes they exist because of Islam and the Quran. I don't believe that, okay? I don't believe that at all, okay? So, of course, if you believe they exist because of Islam and the Quran, then you believe the solution to these problems is the eradication of Islam and the Quran. I mean, that just seems to be logically what you would believe. But you can engage in all kinds of Quranic interpretation that is feminist, and Layla Ahmed and Fatima Mernissi do it. For instance, if you wanted to get technical, which there's no reason to do that at this conference, but there's absolutely nowhere in the Quran where it tells a woman to cover her hair. Doesn't exist, period, full stop, doesn't exist. And the author of the Quran, if you believe it to be God, is very specific about his lawmaking. He says, he names all kinds of body parts, but he does not tell women to cover their hair. So, if you want women to cover their hair, you have to engage in something outside of the Quran, and people do that, and whatever. But at the end of the day, it is all based on your politics. If you want it, or your conclusion, let me say. If you want to believe that women should cover their hair, you can make a pretty compelling argument on the language of the Quran that it says that they should. And if you want to believe that they don't need to, then you can make a pretty compelling argument that the Quran doesn't say that they need to. But I don't see, at the end of the day, I don't think as a secular Arab movement, who we want to talk about how our philosophy can help further our bigger causes. I don't think there's anything to be gained by deriding or criticizing people's particular religious beliefs, whether they're Islamic or otherwise. I don't think there's anything to be gained by that. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to say is, because the point of any secular movement to me, should be, look, you do you, and I'll do me. Unfortunately, that's not sometimes what too many religious people say. They say, I do me, and if you don't do me, then you're going to hell. And our philosophy should be different than that. To say everybody's included, and Islam is a culture that includes us all, regardless of our religiosity. And so it's a bigger umbrella than what people with higher religiosity might say. In that sense, there's not much to be gained by engaging in sort of deriding people's religious beliefs or sort of criticizing the traditional, in a big way, the traditional exegesis of the Quran, because there's a million exegesis of the Quran. So anyway, I guess let's move on. Questions? Let's continue more lunch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi. Thank you. Hi. So all of you presented on different, different topics and different areas, and all of you. One of the things that came up over and over again, or that I noticed over and over again, is that you presented several and different identities. Within the different Muslim communities. Different type of different times and different contexts. I think there is a identity crisis. I think that the more that we know about the different identities within the community, I think that I see an identity crisis. Do you think there is an identity crisis within our community? What is your own personal opinions about the identity crisis?
I do think there is an identity crisis. I see it. I speak a lot as a mother because I'm very, very much in touch with my children and my nephews and so forth, and I see that I see that there is among. Let me give you an example. When Trump announced that Jerusalem would be moved, the capital of Israel would be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, I cannot tell you the number of texts that I got from my nephews and from my sons. And I think if there's one word that I would use to describe how they were feeling, it's wounded pride. And I think so much of identity is being built around this idea of wounded pride, is that particularly for young people who came of age in a post 9/11 world, when the Egyptian revolution erupted, there was euphoria in our community, and people said, for the first time, I feel proud. I feel proud that I'm Egyptian. I feel that there are, and suddenly they saw all of this talent coming. And for Tahrir Square became like a school for the arts. People kept the square meticulously clean. They were teaching people who didn't know how to read and write how to read and write. And it really, really struck me that they need to feel that there is something from their culture that they are building that makes them proud. And they're like, what is Saudi Arabia doing? What are our leaders doing to us? And I think the recognition now, my nephew said to me, we have to recognize that our communities have no one, we have to build ourselves. So I would say that it's an identity crisis that feels it needs to build the collective pride and the institutions that make them feel proud of where they came from. I'm speaking here specifically about, Arab Americans.
Obviously, my talk was about, I guess, sort of an identity crisis. But what's your name? Ish? Fatima? Okay. When I was a kid, let me just explain something. So when I was a kid, I used to, this is like terrible stereotypical, but I worked in a 7-Eleven. And that was my first job. My dad's friend owned a 7-Eleven, so I worked there. But what I would do, and I don't know if a lot of people used to do this when they were kids, but it was so cool that they had this, soda machine where you would serve your own soda. That's so cool when you're a kid, right? And so I'd fill up the cup with ice, and we'd play this game. It's not a game, but we just used to do it, where we would go to every fountain that existed, and we'd just put a little bit of it, okay? A little bit of Coke, a little bit of Dr. Pepper, a little bit of juice, whatever. Just put it all in, and then drink it, okay? So I say I am a Arab, Palestinian, American, Muslim, Christian, right? Now what happens when you put a little bit from every fountain in there? Once they're all in there, that's it, they're all mixed together. You can't pull them out anymore, you can't say I'm this up this time. You're all of these things all at once. And so you're sort of floating on all of these hyphens, you should just let judging on all these. And I think that that's our identity at the end. And now if that's a crisis, then okay, maybe that's a function of of being refugees or being American at the end of the day, because everybody's hyphenated, except white people don't think they're hyphenated, but they are too. And so, but I embrace that. I don't see it as a crisis. I see we're all of these things all at once, all the time. You can never say you're not one of these things. And even I tell my fellow Arab Americans, even if you've only been here a few years, that's it, you're American now. That's what this country is. You're part of this thing now, where we all are part of this experiment, okay? And so I don't really see it as a crisis. I see it as that's who we are. We have to sort of embrace it and accept it. But I do know that my politics, that's why we're here today at the end of the day, we're talking about what is our political goals. My politics is mostly informed by my culture. And the cultural part of all this identity is also not very clear, but it's Arab and Muslim, maybe with a little Palestinian, although that's more of a national identity. I'm American because that's the passport I hold, that's my civic identity. So all of these things exist all at once. But my politics gets informed by my culture more than anything else, which is what I was trying to explain at the end of the day. Not my religious identity outside of Arab culture is usually purely a religious identity. But religious identity, Muslim identity inside Arab culture gets more muddled up with our culture than it does with non-Arabs, even if you're Christian. Like I said, my Arab Christian dad is a Muslim, okay? He hears the Quran natively, right? And all of these, so I don't think I answered your question other than to say, it's not a crisis. It's just who we are, and that's okay. It's okay. We should never buy into the idea, which the Trump people try to do, is to say, just say you're American. Just say you're American. I don't want to hear that you're black or Latino. Of course, this is very easy for white people to say, but just say you're an American. But this is bullshit at the end of the day. This country is that's not what this country is. And it's okay to embrace all of that. And to say we're Arab and Muslim to varying levels, nobody is the judge of all these things. And that's what secularism is. See, secularism should be able to accept very easily someone who goes to the mosque 5, 10, 20 times a day and prays every day and does every ritual and does every holiday. See, secularism says you're part of our movement too. That's the whole idea.
I've spent the last decade locating and documenting Muslim graves in southeast Michigan. I found 28 different places where Muslims are buried, and they're from 31 different countries, communities, subgroups. It's amazing. When you go into a when you go to a graveyard, what you realize is that apart from the 5 principles of Islam, the 5 pillars, there's no such thing as a Muslim. You got Pakistanis, you got Azerbaijanis, you got the Sunnis and Shias, you got Iranians who fall in a different category, you got Nigerians, you got Chinese, you got Ahmadiyas who have their own gravestones, you got Albanians who always have the Albanian flag on their stone, and then you've got the Bektashis who are Albanians, but they have a different identity. You've got African Americans, and then you've got the Nation of Islam, who is a separate group of Arab Americans. African Americans? What you realize is that there is exceptional diversity. The internal diversity within the Muslim community means that the very term Muslim doesn't have any meaning beyond the principles of the faith. And even that, there are large numbers of people who don't have anything religious on their stone. They have the American flag. I mean, how do you even generalize? It becomes almost impossible.
But the diversity breaks down on culture, right?
Yeah, cultural, nationality, those are the things that break down.
Legend and future. I wasn't just talking about her, I was just saying one sentence about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm finished.
I just would like to, I differ a little bit with you about the idea that culture informs our politics. I know that with Palestinians, one of my friends is a Palestinian woman, she's probably in her 70s now, and she's also a Muslim woman married to a Christian man, and she said that in her generation, Arab nationalism trumped religious identity, and that it was quite acceptable, because I was very astonished. But I think, for example, when you look at other Christian Arabs, the situation can be a little bit different. So in Egypt, for example, Coptic Egyptians voted overwhelmingly for Trump. Their culture informed their politics, even though culturally I am much more like a Coptic Christian than I am like a Pakistani Muslim, for instance. But they were wholly convinced that Hillary Clinton supported the Muslim Brotherhood, and they felt that voting for Trump was a way to actually, and so I think we really need to be very careful before we generalize about all Arab Christians embracing politics. I'm not saying that that this doesn't happen, but I'm saying that within certain Christian communities, the politics can really vary.
But that is actually an anomaly. So if you look at the history of Arab American, and especially the Arab American Christian community, this thing where, for instance, Chaldeans in Michigan, whether they consider themselves Arabs or not is different, but okay, but Chaldeans in Michigan, it seems, I mean, we don't know the numbers at the end of the day, but it seems that they overwhelmingly voted for Trump. And maybe also with Coptic Egyptians in America. But at the end of the day, those things are anomalies. They're not the pattern. And so while they might have let, in this instance, right, religious identity go over their cultural identity, that's an anomaly. And what we saw very quickly is when Trump deported hundreds of Chaldeans from Michigan, or tried to deport them, they're still sitting in Youngstown Federal Prison, they turned very quickly and they started asking for solidarity from the Muslim Arab communities in Dearborn, and of course we gave it to them because that's the right thing to do. But they turned very quickly because they realized that that calculation was wrong, because Trump's culture informed his politics. At the end of the day, he doesn't care that Chaldeans are Christian or that Coptics are Christian. He doesn't give a shit at all. His culture informed his politics. So that ends up happening all the time. And it's important to understand that this idea of religion trumping your culture and your political identity is also very recent. So go to YouTube and go pull up an Kulthum concert from the 70s, right? It's a bunch of couples and overwhelmingly Muslim with their Muslim wives in miniskirts, smoking cigarettes, having a drink in an Egyptian theater, watching an Arab singer celebrating Arab classical music, not anything Western. Celebrating Arabic classical music, and that was very normal. That was the modus operandi of that culture, and they were not less religious than people are today. So, that's the point.
I think that unless there's a very necessary comment, then we would like to thank the panel. After this final comment, go ahead, Ginan.
It's just that I agree with you. They can enjoy, but that's the cultural sphere, and that's a little bit different. And I think things are changing, and even within Egypt now, there's a certain class of Muslim Arabs who are becoming much more amenable, following the leadership of Saudi Arabia in the region, are shifting, and I think it's really important for us to explore the shifts over historical time.
Let's give a round of applause for our panel. The conference, definitely, one of the goals of the conference is actually to initiate or empower the conversation, and this is the beginning. Conversations will continue during lunch. Please enjoy lunch. We'll be back here at 2:15. So we are back on time, and we'll be back in the conference hall at 2:15. Thank you very much.